Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Jordan Christie.
And I'm Barry Graham.
We highlight the week's news and stories happening all over Hampton Roads. We have another hot batch of stories for you this week. Artificial intelligence has become a dicey topic for many people in recent years. Grocers in Williamsburg are leveraging it to reduce food waste, but it's also coming at the cost of reducing donations to food pantries.
A lot of that fresh produce, especially the fruits and vegetables, things that are more expensive for our food insecure neighbors, therefore more valuable to them because they're so out of reach, are coming in shorter supply.
A decade-long study about blue crab cannibalism in the Chesapeake Bay provides insight into the crustacean's odd behavior.
And we'll have a roundup of everything we know about last week's shooting at Old Dominion University. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. The U.S. and Israel's ongoing war with Iran continues to impact naval operations in Norfolk. WHRO's military reporter Steve Walsh reports the USS Gonzales left Monday as the conflict continues to ramp up.
The destroyer USS Gonzales pulled out of Norfolk Monday morning. With a crew of just over 300, the ship will head to Naval Weapons Station Yorktown, where it will be armed.
We are trained and ready to go, and we're making sure that right now our focus is on a safe transit up to Yorktown and then follow on deployment overseas.
The Navy will not release where the ship is headed, but the U.S. continues to send ships to the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz has become a choke point for international oil shipping. The carrier USS Bush is also inching closer to deploying from Norfolk with its carrier strike group in the coming weeks. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Portsmouth, Norfolk, and Newport News will get most of the $2.4 million set aside for port communities in the state budget. WHRO's Toby Cox breaks down the numbers and how they'll be put to real-world use.
Governor Abigail Spanberger says $1.5 million in investments will create new spaces for small businesses, support Virginia's manufacturing industry, and revitalize infrastructure. The city of Portsmouth will receive a grant to renovate a vacant property on High Street. The project will create maker spaces, commissary kitchens, and recording and art studios. The Norfolk Economic Development Authority will receive funding to improve 5 industrial buildings currently used for glass abrasives manufacturing. And Newport News will repair pier infrastructure in the Seafood Industrial Park to support local seafood and maritime industries. Spanberger says the projects will pave the way for new jobs in the region. Toby Cox, WHRO News.
AI tools are helping grocers decrease food waste in the notoriously tight-margined industry. But WHRO's Nick McNamara reports it also means fewer donations of fresh produce to food pantries.
The Grove Christian Outreach Center in James City County noticed fresh food donations from stores dropped by roughly half by mid-2025.
A lot of that fresh produce, especially the fruits and vegetables, things that are more expensive for our food insecure neighbors, therefore more valuable to them because they're so out of reach, are coming in shorter supply.
That's Katie Patrick, the center's executive director. Long-term, she says decreasing the accessibility of produce will lead to worse health outcomes for people who rely on pantries, including the up to 300 families per week Grove serves from the greater Williamsburg area. Grove is taking a multi-pronged approach to solutions. That includes increasing relationships with specific grocers and farmers to increase donations, raising money to buy more fresh food, and bolstering its stock with produce grown at its recently acquired community garden. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Since Virginia began allowing casinos, advocacy groups pushed to make the establishments fully non-smoking. Craig Wright reports on the issue and what it means for casino employees for partner station WVTF.
There's not been any action that I'm aware of this year around preventing smoking in a casino. I've had some preliminary conversations with stakeholders. However, we did not come up with a bill this year, but I do think it's important because individuals who work in the casinos deserve to have clean air, and I know that it is a problem for several of them, and I'd like to do something about it at some point.
That's Virginia State Senator Jennifer Boysko during this year's General Assembly session. I spoke with the senator last spring on the same topic, but as this session concludes, the issue remains at status quo.
The casinos have the ability to set the policy themselves. You know, the hope was that perhaps they would see that there was a concern from their employees, and they might make some changes on their own without requiring us to legislatively mandate it.
But a legal mandate seems to be exactly what it will take to bring about change to the exemption in Virginia's Indoor Clean Air Act, according to Bronson Frick, Director of Advocacy for Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights.
The casinos generally say that they will comply with whatever the law is. And in states that have a smoke-free casino requirement, they gladly still invest in those markets.
This year, Virginia casinos will generate over $1 billion in adjusted gross gaming revenue. State and local coffers will reap the benefits, but the dealers, waitstaff, and security who run the games remain some of the only workers who are unprotected in a landscape that has seen much change since Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights began their efforts 50 years ago.
Back in the 70s, smoke-free workplaces like offices, movie theaters, those were all considered impossible, and now they're completely taken for granted. And you think about airplanes, restaurants. So the same thing is true with casino workplaces, which are today's major hospitality workplaces in more states. So we're committed to supporting people who are still waiting for their same right to basic smoke-free workplace protection.
An employee from Rivers Casino in Portsmouth says there are effects on workers. We're not using her name because she fears retaliation from the company.
As soon as we get to work, it's like an instant headache. The smoke just triggers something, And I know there's days when I'll be fine, and as soon as I walk to work, it's like, okay, here's the headache.
And while Rivers Casino does have designated smoking and non-smoking areas, she says it does little to protect from exposure to the smoke.
They told us we were going to have this great ventilation system that was going to do so well, and it's horrible.
20 states already have smoke-free casinos, and progress continues to be made in other states. But as for Virginia, another General Assembly has come and gone with no change. Yet Bronson Frick insists the day is coming.
Eventually, they'll be smoke-free. It's just disappointing that it's going to take longer than what these workers deserve.
Senator Boysko echoes that change comes slow.
We'll see what happens in the next couple of years.
I reached out to all 5 Virginia casinos for comment. None agreed to participate for this story. I'm Craig Wright.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, the General Assembly passed a bill to help protect workers from the impacts of extreme heat. But first, heart disease is the leading cause of death for women in the U.S. And as WHRO's I-Ching Wang details, it's something that a local group of women is working to change.
A 9-week campaign supported by the American Heart Association is bringing together community leaders to raise money and share information about heart health. Entrepreneur and Navy veteran Katie Rogers Johnson joined the campaign after losing both of her parents to heart disease. She says her mother had warning signs the family thought were just fatigue or heartburn, heart attack symptoms that are often overlooked in women.
Ever since that happened, it's been our mission as a family to ensure that more women know this, that more information is put out, that people learn hands-only CPR, different things like that, just so that maybe we can help one more family to realize that these are the symptoms that women have. They're different than men.
The funds will support local programs. I-Ching Wang, WHRO News.
A decades-long study reveals new details about blue crab cannibalism in the Chesapeake Bay. You might think the crabs are simply hungry, but WHRO's Catherine Hefner breaks down why the situation is more complicated than that.
Each summer since 1989, the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center tethered a few baby blue crabs along a tributary of the bay in Maryland and watched what happened next. The juvenile crabs were overwhelmingly eaten by adults, with no other predators. Researcher Tuck Hines says the findings help identify which areas of the bay serve as refuge for babies trying to survive. That's key to managing the fishery moving forward.
It's understanding the complexities of what's regulating a population of one of the most iconic species of the bay.
He says the ecosystem's changing quickly, from invasive blue catfish, climate change, and hardening shoreline with things like seawalls. That makes it all the more important to understand the underlying dynamics. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power recently announced plans to install a high-voltage power line from a site near Lynchburg to Culpeper County.
The 115-mile project would require landowners to sell a 200-foot right-of-way across their properties and involve placement of metal towers as tall as a 12-story building.
The companies have been holding community information meetings, drawing large crowds of mostly unhappy people. WVTF's Sandy Hausman stopped by one in Fluvanna County.
More than 300 people showed up at the small community center in Fluvanna to learn about the Valley Link project after they got letters about the proposed power line. They packed into a large room where company experts manned a series of tables set up to address various concerns. Outside, residents waited in line for admission and shared their concerns with Radio IQ.
We need to show and push back and tell them, you can't just waltz into town and decide to take everything eminent domain. This is our county.
You know, we didn't move to Fluvanna County and buy property here to have it be torn up and ruined.
I'm a mom, and I'm really worried about my kids growing up in this county. Projects like this are associated with higher risks of childhood cancer.
It brings down property values. If you don't sell them your property, they can take it from you. That's not right.
There are better ways to run it, shorter lines and more direct, but it might cost them a little bit more money. And I think the billion-dollar companies came down to Fluvanna County because they thought they could get it cheaper and not have to worry about so much opposition.
Ditto.
Many were upset by some logistical problems with the meeting itself.
Our letter said 5:30 today, and we received the letter today.
They said 5:30 to 7:30 on the letters that they sent out and 3:30 to 7:30 on the website, so you didn't know when to come.
We thought this was going to be an actual sit-down meeting, but apparently it's not, so that's disappointing.
We're curious how close they actually come to our house. I would like to see a more blown-up view of that map they sent us.
That problem aside, Dominion spokesman Craig Carper was ready to respond to local reporters about issues raised by the public.
We want to share whatever they want to know about, but also we really want feedback.
He said the original plan was to install the high-voltage line for more than 150 miles, running through 16 counties, but it scaled back to 115 miles and just 9 counties: Appomattox, Buckingham, Campbell, Culpeper, Fluvanna, Goochland, Louisa, Orange, and Spotsylvania. 3 possible routes were chosen. The goal, he said, is to avoid densely populated areas, schools, pristine natural or historic places, while limiting river and stream crossings.
We're trying our best to juggle all of those things and thread the needle to ultimately have a project that meets the demand, but minimizes impact wherever possible.
He conceded demand for electricity was fairly flat until data centers came along, but pointed to new industrial development in the state.
We've seen Lego, Lilly, other biotech coming to Virginia.
And he cited climate change in claiming demand for power has increased.
We are having colder winters and we're having hotter summers.
And he insisted electromagnetic energy coming from power lines does not pose a threat to human health.
There's decades of data on this, and we haven't seen any causality, us or any of our peers.
The World Health Organization classifies extremely low-frequency electromagnetic fields as possibly carcinogenic to humans based on limited evidence showing an association with childhood leukemia. The International Agency for Research on Cancer found inadequate evidence in relation to all other cancers. The utilities have looked at building along major highways, but Carper says that was a no-go.
That has come up, and it's been looked at thoroughly, and there were a lot of restrictions that prevented us from doing that.
But could this line be buried?
It hasn't been done. The technology does not exist.
The companies expect to file the Valley Link request with the State Corporation Commission in September and hope to have sign-off 1 year later, followed by 2 years of construction. I'm Sandy Hausman.
Legislation now awaiting the governor's signature would make it easier for faith groups to build affordable housing. WHRO's Toby Cox reports it comes after 2 years of pushback.
The bill would waive rezoning requirements for faith groups to build housing on their tax-exempt property. Sheila Hurley-Hennessy with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy says the rezoning process doesn't guarantee approval and is expensive.
as congregations are shrinking, they can consider this housing as a path forward to continue living their mission and to serve the community.
Hurley Hennessy says localities pushed back when it was introduced the past 2 years. But this year, she says lawmakers saw the need.
We've had local control and local authority over zoning for decades, and yet we still find ourselves with a shortage of nearly 300,000 homes in the Commonwealth. That's not acceptable.
She says the bill has guardrails to ensure local standards, like for historic districts, still apply. Toby Cox, WHRO News.
Senator Tim Kaine introduced a bill to make it easier for families using military health insurance to use local pharmacies. WHO's Steve Walsh says the idea is to give military families more options.
The bill would allow local pharmacies to fill prescriptions for non-generic drugs, which is not allowed under the current rules for the military health insurance TRICARE, says Senator Tim Kaine.
Many community pharmacies have left the TRICARE network because they were losing money on TRICARE transactions.
The idea is to open up more options for the over 9 million service members, retirees, and their families who use TRICARE, Kaine says. Providers have complained that the reimbursement rate for TRICARE services are too low. Patients complain that they have too few choices. The legislation is expected to be folded into the next defense bill. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
The General Assembly passed legislation to help protect workers from extreme heat. WHRO's Catherine Hefner reported on the bill last month.
Heat is the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S., and it's getting worse from climate change. In Virginia, more than 4,000 people went to the emergency room with heat-related illness last year. Here's Norfolk delegate Phil Hernandez.
People understand how punishingly hot it is in Virginia. I think you can imagine what it's like to be a roofer in July. It can be incredibly dangerous.
But right now, nothing's on the books to directly protect these workers from heat.
That is a gap that I think we can no longer afford to be okay with.
Hernandez's proposal would require employers to provide shade, rest, and water for people working in hot conditions outdoors and indoors. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
It's been an eventful month at the Virginia Beach oceanfront. A temporary weekend curfew meant to control crowds and prevent violence began there last weekend and will extend into this weekend. WHRO's John Doucette has more from the water.
That's police announcing a new curfew for unaccompanied minors. They can't be in parts of the oceanfront from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. on weekends. Police Chief Paul Newdigate says it's about keeping people safe and controlling crowds that include juveniles.
Tonight is about education, warning, making sure they're aware that there is a curfew in place.
City Council authorized it after a shooting March 7th injured 6 people at the oceanfront and large crowds gathered. Saturday night was quiet amid cool weather. Z. Salih manages a shop on Atlantic Avenue. He says warmer weather may determine if the new effort helps.
I don't mind the curfew as long as we're going to be having, the families, good people, customers. Yeah, last weekend it was ridiculous.
The temporary oceanfront curfew lasts through the end of April. John Doucette, WHRO News.
Dance Theater of Harlem brings its signature ballet, Firebird, to Hampton Roads for 3 performances starting today at Norfolk's Chrysler Hall.
It's been more than 2 decades since it staged the Igor Stravinsky Classic.
WHRO's Denise Watson has more.
Virginia Symphony, dancers from the North Carolina School of Arts, and 3 students from the Governor's School for the Arts in Norfolk will be part of Dance Theater of Harlem's revival of Firebird this weekend. Trailblazing Dance Theater of Harlem went 22 years without performing Firebird, embarking on a 2026 world tour that included a stop in Paris last month. The company's artistic director, Robert Garland, said the story is based on a Russian folktale reimagined through an Afro-futuristic lens. It appeals to more than traditional ballet aficionados.
We also get people that are interested in seeing people of color on a stage, because for some, representation still does matter.
The performances are part of the Virginia Arts Festival. Denise Watson, WHRO News.
Freelance writer Vicki L. Friedman contributed to this report.
The Old Dominion University community is picking up the pieces after last week's deadly shooting. WHRO reporter Toby Cox was on campus the day after it happened.
The campus is quiet the Friday after the shooting. Classes are canceled and many students have already left for spring break. ODU Counseling Services Director Joy Himmel says there's still been a steady flow of students talking to mental health counselors who set up shop in the dining hall.
We have many students that we've talked to over the last 24 hours that were there in Constance Hall. They heard the shots, they heard the screaming.
Federal investigators say the shooting is being investigated as an act of terrorism. They identified the shooter as 36-year-old Mohammed Baylor Jallo.
Jallo shot 3 people in Constance Hall. Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Shaw, who ran the Military Science Department, died from his injuries.
WHO military and veterans reporter Steve Walsh found that those who knew Shaw knew him as a dedicated and loyal teacher.
Shaw enlisted in the Army in 2003. He joined ODU's ROTC program to become an officer and graduated in 2007. Before turning to the classroom, Shaw spent most of his time in Army aviation, including time in Iraq. His medals include a Bronze Star. He was married with 1 child.
The shooter was found dead after ROTC students in the classroom subdued him, investigators said. Dominic Evans, special agent in charge of the Norfolk FBI field office, said there were indications of Jallo's motivations during the shooting.
We have confirmed reports that prior to him conducting this act of terrorism, he shouted, stated, Allah Akbar.
The shooter pleaded guilty to providing material support to terrorist group ISIS in 2016 and was released from prison in 2024. Governor Abigail Spanberger says she's waiting on more details to see where the holes were in the system that enabled the attack, including how a man previously convicted of felony terror charges got his hands on a gun.
But she is critical of decisions at the federal level that could have redirected FBI resources toward counterterrorism.
When we here in Virginia and across the rest of the country have diverted those resources, like man hours on the ground, investigative time, towards assisting on immigration issues or on other priorities, that is time taken away from doing the extraordinarily important work of investigating expansive networks and finding where there may be threats on the ground.
ODU President Brian Hemphill made several promises after the shooting.
We are committed to examining everything that we can to understand what happened and whether there's anything that we could have done to prevent it. We will undertake a thorough review of our safety and security practices to determine whether any changes are appropriate to make our campus even safer. We will be thorough, and we will be honest about what we find.
The school also made counseling available, and businesses in Norfolk offered students and faculty free food and other services. Our reporter Toby Cox spoke with one of the on-campus counselors about what recovery could look like.
Reverend Joshua McCauley is a campus minister at ODU. He says grief and healing will look different for everyone.
Lamenting can take so many shapes of emotions. So for many students, there's some that are treating today as normal and just kind of going through the motions and aren't taking time to process. There are some that they're just not ready to process.
Constance Hall, which is the main hub for ODU's School of Business, will be closed for the rest of the semester. You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Toby Cox, John Doucette, Catherine Hefner, Vicki L. Friedman, Nick McNamara, Steve Walsh, Yi-Ching Wang, and Denise Watson.
WVTF's Craig Wright and Sandy Hausman, also Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder that you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed.
You can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Barry Graham.
And I'm Jordan Christie. Have a great weekend.